Hey everyone, welcome back to another Tic Tac Taiko. As you can see, I'm standing again. Well, you can't see it, but it's inferred by the fact that I'm not sitting. Anyways, this week we're going to talk about something I hear in a lot of taiko solos, a surprising amount of taiko solos. We're going to talk about what it is and how to address it. Before I get into the fun stuff, as it were, just a reminder, if you like this content even a little bit, please go ahead, hit that like button. Not so much that you're telling me I'm doing a wonderful job, but the algorithm of YouTube knows that with enough likes, this is good content, which means it gets seen by more people, which means it helps the community, and we all benefit. And don't forget to hit subscribe while you're doing that. Thank you. Rather than just tell you what we're going to do in this week's video, I want you to see if you can figure it out what it is I'm going to talk about. I'm going to play 4 counts of 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 or 8 counts of that. And I want you to see if you can figure out what it is that I'm doing over and over again. So, re. Maybe some of you have figured it out, maybe some of you haven't, maybe some of you are in the middle, there's a thing there but you can't quite pinpoint it. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to play another 4 counts of 8, but this time I'm going to emphasize and highlight the area that I want you to focus on. So, re. Every time I did this, there was a thing. Did you catch it? Well, whether I did or not, let me explain what's going on. What you see below is future Adam editing in 2 counts of 8. And these counts of 8 symbolize any 2 measures that we played the count of 8 solos in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 2, 3, etc. You get it. So what was happening in the solos I just played was essentially this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. 2 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. There's nothing happening playing-wise between 8 and 1. There's a gap. And gaps are the subject of this week's video. There's nothing inherently wrong with gaps. You need gaps or space, which is ma in Japanese, to actually have music. Without space, without rest, you just have a wall of sound and it becomes unlistenable, if that's even a word. But you know what I mean. You need rest, you need space for music to be enjoyed. But the video this week is addressing specifically the gap between the 8 and the 1. This is something that is unusually prevalent in North American taiko solos, but not just North America. And once you start identifying this gap in that one particular place, you start to hear it a lot. That's what happened to me, and hence why I'm making this video. Now, if this isn't inherently bad, why make a video on it? Because I feel like this can be extremely limiting to a person's growth. If you're always putting or often putting a gap between the 8 and the 1, you're not going to be able to create more interesting and more intricate musical phrases. You're going to be stuck at a somewhat fundamental level. And the first step to getting better at something is often to identify it. So here we are. But I can't help but wonder why this has become a thing. I have a working theory. Maybe it's true. Maybe there's some truth to it. I wonder if when people join taiko groups and they're hearing taiko solos, there's a part of their brain that sort of disassociates taiko from music. You know, you're hearing music all the time, I hope, and there are solos in a lot of the music, but most non-taiko music tends to be melodic. And melodies, you can have a note that just holds over many beats. Can't do that as much in taiko. So it almost feels like, well, if the people in my group often end on 8 and start on 1, that's how a taiko solo should sound. And other music, well, that's other music, but it shouldn't be different. What we play on Taiko can be a reflection of any rhythm, any genre, if we want it to. So really, there's no reason to end on the 8 and start on the 1 unless you intend to do it, and definitely no reason why you should do it over and over and over and over and over and over. Now that we know what the gap is and maybe some ideas as to why, let's talk about what to do about it. Simplest thing to do if you have a gap is to fill it in. And the simplest fill is a single note. I'm going to play 2 8-count solos. The simplest, most basic solo. You could argue it's not even a solo. I'm going to play 1 and 2 and 3 and the first time through with the gap and the second time through filling the gap. Sol, re, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and. That 8 and filled the gap, technically. So really, if there's a gap between one note and the next and you put any note in between, you have filled the gap. Now you could get really, really into it and go, well, now there's a gap between that note and the next. Yes, I'm just talking about the one sort of phenomenon that I keep hearing, which is the gap between the 8 and the 1. And to fill the gap, all you have to do is put a single note somewhere in there. Another way to fill it is really simple, and you hear it a lot in non-Taiko music. It might sound something a little like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, 1. This is literally a drum fill. It's a lot of evenly spaced notes, in this case between the 8 and the 1. So you can have a single, you can have a double, you can have a lot of notes. Doesn't matter. Putting something in is a way to fill the gap. Now that's a very, very rudimentary way to fill a gap. 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and, or even 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, right? You can do that, but there are some more interesting ways, or at least ways to start making you think about more interesting ways to fill a gap. One way is to simply start the bridge earlier. If you have your 8 and you have your 1, why not start somewhere before the 8? That's what we're going to do next. I'll make it really simple. We're going to do the same kind of fill, but I'll start it on the 7 and. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 1. Another thing we can do, instead of starting before the 8, is to end after the 1. This can be a little tricky because it can be very easy to lose a downbeat, but it's really cool when you get it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And of course, you can start before the 8 and end after the 1. Why not? And I've been doing some very rudimentary solos until now, so let's make them a little more interesting to show the example. Now, even though I said gaps aren't bad, I've just talked about how to fill, but we can just use the gap. We can make the gap part of our solo and work for us. And there are a few ways you can do that. The first is to change where you put the gap. So let's say we want a gap between one note and the next, one beat and the next. Let's say we want it between the 6 and the 7 instead of the 8 and the 1. Nothing earth-shaking or mind-blowing there. We're just taking the gap that we had that comes up a lot and moved it somewhere else. Another thing you can do with gaps is to make them longer, as long as you want. Let's not get crazy here. We just have 8-count solos. So I'll take my 6 to 7 and now I'll make it 5 to 7. One other thing we can do Now that we've got different placement, we have different lengths, different frequencies or amounts. We can have as many gaps as we want. Again, we're only dealing with 8 count solos, so if I put in 12, there's nothing happening at all. So let's do our 5 to 7 break, and I don't know, let's do a gap between 1 and 2 and 5 to 7. So, re. That one was more difficult than I thought, but you get the point. Another way to fill gaps that I really enjoy is to use a 3. And the 3 can be a lot of things. You can use 3/4, 2/3, triplets, dongo, or a swung triplet. Rather than talking about every single idea and possibility, I'm just going to do a few. Again, I'm going to focus on the gap, the original gap between 8 and 1 for now. A lot of those I definitely started before the 7. Some I think I even started one of the 5. But you start doing your bridges before, you start doing your bridges after, you start combining it with 2s and 3s, you can do it with 5s and 7s, it doesn't matter. Once you start getting comfortable with this, you get a very rich and hearty solo. There's nothing inherently wrong with gaps, and you'll hear me say this several times in this video. You need gaps or rests in music to make it music. Without rest, you just have a wall of sound, and no one wants to hear that. But if there is a danger in gaps, it's having the same gap every X number of measures, in this case every 8, which is what I'm hearing in a lot of taiko solos. That gap between the 8 and the 1 is almost a habit for a surprising amount of players. When someone does this over and over and over, they're effectively limiting what they're musically able to do and where they're musically able to go. And think about it from the audience's point of view. Think about, all right, turn yourself around, listen to solos. It is comforting to be able to predict a little bit where a solo is going, and it's a lot of fun when it goes a different direction. But when it's the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and one soloist is doing it a lot, and then another soloist and another soloist, an audience, at least my ears, start to go a little numb. It's like, yeah, okay, that thing again. You don't want that. You want to keep your solos entertaining. And entertaining doesn't have to be intricate and complex and dazzling and things are on fire, but you want to be careful that you're not doing things that are so easily predictable that they become a little boring. So we covered gaps, we covered bridges, and remember, there's nothing inherently wrong about a gap between the 8 and the 1. It's only bad if A, you're not aware of it, and B, you can't break free of the habit. But you can now that you watch this video, right? So let me know what you think. If you find yourself doing 8 and 1 or other such habits, let me know. It's fun to have those conversations, and it's fun to hear what people become aware of. And until next time, keep on practicing and be well.